And now we begin Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, the end of our Mishnah. B'chamisha sar, if he finds a kofitz on the 15th of Nisan, which means on Yontif itself, he finds a kofitz, shochet ba miyat. He can use it immediately on the 15th of Nisan, meaning on Yontif itself, and he doesn't need to be makbil the keli. And why is that so? Shekalim bevade abaylim kvar dilus hakofitz me esmol if you should tzarches hakofitz beyontiv hidei lishparas hatzomos hachagiga. As we said before, on the 15th he would divvy up the portions of the chagiga, and he would cut it into pieces. He would use a kofitz, a cleaver, in order to do so. And therefore, for sure, we can assume that he was makvil the kli on Erev Yontif. Nimtzeis kshura l'sakin. What if he finds this kofitz tied to a knife? There, the Mishnah says harei hi kesakin, which means even if he finds the kofitz on the 14th of Nisan, on a weekday, he can shech the kofitz immediately. He doesn't need to be makbil it, because we're going to say that for sure he was makbil the kofitz together with the knife on the 13th of Nisan. And we'll see the Gemara is going to quote another opinion in the Brisa that disagrees with that Mishnah. Now, the Mishnah said that if you find rok in your Yerushalayim, it's tahar, with the exception of the shuk ha'elyon. That was Rabbi Meir's statement. Rabbi Ovin b'shem Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. What is this shuk ha'elyon? Why is it tamei? And he says, katzron shel nechasim shel nachrim. Katzron is a base kibus begadim. That's where they did the laundry. And Hayasham, it was located in the shuk ha'elyon, and that's where the goyim were in charge of running these laundry shops. And therefore, we assume that rok that you find in that higher marketplace where they had the katzron was occupied by goyim, and the Rabbanan made a gzeira, as we said before, that the nachri has the status of a zav, and his rok is metameh. Rab Chanina tells us about Arodos Hayu Nocharim B'Yushalayim. The Goyim used to kill. Nocharim means hargim. Mules in Yerushalayim. Where? In the Shuk HaElyon, in that Shuk HaElyon in Yerushalayim. Why were they doing so? Now it seems that the Melech, the non-Jewish king, was accompanied by lions, and they fed the meat of mules to lions. And they had that place in the Shuk in Yerushalayim, and that's where they would kill these mules and feed their meat, their carcass, to the arayos, to the lions. To see what he says here. He says they would spear wild donkeys in the upper marketplace of Jerusalem. Since the butchers were Gentiles and they had the status of Zovin, any spittle found there was considered tameh. He doesn't tell you here in the English why they killed the donkeys. Okay. Now, Hayu Ole Regolim. Now, as a result of the fact that the Ole Regolim had to pass through the Shuk HaElyon in order to get access to the Beis HaMikdash, and at that time, the Goyim were slaughtering their donkeys, so there was blood all over the place. Is Mishtakim B'dam Ad Ar Kuvosehen. So the Jewish people who came on Aliyah to the Regel, they had blood up to their knees. The Chacham asked them, is the blood of a non-kosher animal, in this case, a mule, mitame them, such that they wouldn't be allowed to enter into the Beis Hamikdash. The Chacham did not prohibit them because the Rabbanan held that the dam of a nevela is not mitame. And this is going to be the Sukkot Sagamar that we're going to learn now about the status of dam of nevela. It's a major, major machlokas. But the Chachamim that we saw now that allowed the Olei Rogim to pass through the shuk, even though they were steeped in blood, these Chachamim represent the opinion that the dam of a nevela is not mitam. However, the Gemara now quotes a dissenting opinion. Rabbi Simon b'Shem Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, he says, Maisa b'Preda Mishal Beis Rebbe Shem Mesa. So the mule in Rebbe's household died. V'tiru es domeha mishum nevela. They established that the dam of this dead carcass of a pirda is not mitami tumas nevela. However, we shouldn't take that at face value. Why? Because Rabbi Lazar shoyel Rabbi Simon ad kama. How much dam did they come in contact with when they established that it was tar? V'lo agive, Rabbi Simon did not have a response. Shal, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Amalei. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, Ad revius tar, Yosem mikan tome. That the reason why in base Rebbe they retire the dam of nevela, they retire it. That's because it was less than a revius of dam. But had it been a volume of revius adam, then it would be mitame tumas nevela. Now the shear of revius adam is because a liquid, if you congeal it, it becomes karush. It would be equal to a kizayis. So it has the status of a kizayis of a nevela. Ubash l'Rab Lazar. And Rabbi Lazar was embarrassed. He was upset about the whole thing. The lo chazer le Rabbi Simon Shmuasa. That when he asked this question to Rabbi Simon did not have an answer. And the problem was that he had heard this from Yavshua ben Levi. The Rabbi Simon heard it just like he heard it. And why is it that Rav Simon didn't have an answer to differentiate between less than a kizayis dam and more than a kizayis dam? We have another story. Rabbi Bibi Havi Yosef Masne. He was sitting and he was learning Hadein Uvda, the story of the Preda of Rebbe that they were metiret mishum nevela, and Rabbi Bibi did not explicate exactly how much dam there was, and it was still tar. Amalei, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Bisna asked Rabbi Bivi on Kama, when they were mitayr in the base Rebbe case of the dam of Preda, how much dam was there? Omar lei, so he responded, Ad revius tar yosem mikan tameh. Had it been a full revius of dam, it would be mitame. And Boadbe, Rav Bibi gave him a push with his sandal. Amalei Rav Zrika. So Rav Zrika turns to Rav Bibi, says, "Begin davik shielach." Just because he's asking you a question at Boadbe, you're pushing him, you're punishing him, you're humiliating him. Amalei. And this is a little bit of an agadita for a few lines. Begin to lo havis daiti be, which in Hebrew is translated as ein lo haisa daiti miyushevas alai. I wasn't concentrating. I was in a very bad state psychologically. Why? The Omer of Chanin, and now we're going to learn a little bit about the Tochacha. At the end of Sefer Dvarim, it says, "V'hayu chayecha tluim lecha mineged upachadet olayla v'yomam v'lo samin b'chayecha. You're not going to believe that you'll be able to continue to exist, to live. V'ayu chayecha tluim lecha mineged zeh. This is the first level of poverty. Shulokeach lo chitim l'shana. In other words, he doesn't own any fields, any land, any karka, and he has to buy grains from the local vendor. And on an annual basis, he will have to buy a supply of grains that would last him for his whole family for an entire year. Then we get to the next level of tochacha, more severe. Upachadeto laila v'yomam. This describes the situation of Zeu Shalokeach ben Asidki, that he purchases his bread from a vendor who bakes the bread on a weekly basis. And he knows that he'll have a supply of bread for this week. He doesn't know if he'll have the money to buy bread the next week. And then we get to the worst level, the most severe level of poverty, v'lo samin b'chayecha. Zehu lokeach. This is a person who buys on a daily basis minapaltar from the baker. He doesn't know if he'll have enough money to buy bread tomorrow to put on his table. Vanos samech apaltere. And Rabbi says about himself that he buys daily bread. What he's able to buy for that day, he knows he'll have to survive for that day. He doesn't know what's going to be tomorrow. He has no more funds. And in that state of mind, of poverty, of worrying about tomorrow, he gave a push to Rabbi Yitzchak, even though he didn't deserve it. My Kidon, what is the final halacha with regard to dam of nevela, revius dam of nevela? Is it mitame? Hey, this is a mission in Edios. Hey, Rabbi Yeshua ben Psora, al dam nevelos shehutar. Even if you have a revius of dam of nevela, it's tar. Mautar. Once again, we cannot take this Gemara at face value. We can't walk away from this Gemara thinking that according to Rabbi Yeshua, dam nevela, no matter how large the volume of it, is tar. That's not so. Mautar, tar milahachshir holitamos mitame. There are two dinim of dam. Dam is one of the 7 mashkim that if they fall on a foodstuff, they're machshir. It's one of the 7 machshirim. And now the question is, what's the status of dam nevela? And the answer is it's tar, meaning if the dam comes out of the nevela onto an object, that foodstuff is not makabel tumah, because dam nevela is not a machshir. But if somebody comes in contact with the dam itself and it has a revius, then he contracts tumah. So again, dam, revius dam of nevela is not machshir, but it is mitame. So the Gemara says, "The ein lanu kayotzibo kishir tumasa." That the Mishnah, when it concludes ein lanu kayotzebo, again, this is the Mishnah in Edios, it says kishir tuma, kishir tumasa. What does that mean? Kishir tumasa. That the Mishnah now, I skipped, I'm sorry, I apologize. It says the following. Mautar, so we said, tar milahachshir miltame mitame. Now it says the following. Tamon taninon. We have a Mishnah, I said it was in Edios. I apologize. It's a Mishnah machshirin. David, do you hear me? A Mishnah machshirin. I don't need any, you don't have to send me an email on that. I stand corrected. Do you hear me? I can't see you, I can't hear you, but I'm assuming you're hearing me. It's a Mishnah in machshirin.
I hear you.
Good, okay. All right, so you don't have to, I know you're very, I know it's a Mishnah in machshirin. Okay. Now, what does the Mishnah Machshirin say? It says, Dam Asheretz Kibisara, that the dam of one of the chayos, the crawling creatures that is metame, the dam of the sheretz has the same status as its basar. What does that mean? A sheretz, right, this creeping creature that's mentioned in Vayikra Perek Yud Aleph, is metame once it dies. So if you come in contact with the dead sheretz, you're tameh. And the Mishnah says that the blood of a sheretz has the same status as the flesh or the basar of the sheretz, and it means that it's metame to a sheretz. And now we get on to the question of being a machshir. And it says here, metame v'eno machshir. So we give the status of the blood, we give it to the status of the basar. And like the basar, it transmits tumas sheretz, but like the basar, it does not machshir, even though it's a liquid. We have nothing similar to that. In other words, we never equate the blood of another creature to the basar. So we see clearly that the blood of nevela does not transmit tum at all. Because again, as far as machshirin is concerned, we said that a dam sheretz is metame v'eno machshir. So if we're contrasting sheretz with other dead animals, nevela, then we must be doing so with regard to the din of tumah, not with the din of machshirin, because even a sheretz is not a machshir, the dam sheretz. So the implication here is that the dam of other creatures, if it became the dam of nevela, is not metame at all. And here we were saying that the dam of nevela, if it is a volume of a revius, it would be metame. It's not a machshir, but it's a metame. So Gemara answers, Ein lanu kayotze bo. When the Mishnah says that there's nothing like it, it means kishir tu masa. That means what's unique about a sheretz, and that is how much dam of a sheretz do you need, what volume, in order to be metame. And here we have a din of ki siora, even if it's the size of a lentil. And here we have the equation between the dam of a sheretz and the basar of the sheretz, just like the basar of the sheretz, if you come in contact with this metame, if you have a siora, so to the dam of the sheretz, even if you have a small volume of dam sheretz, it's metame. However, in the case of the veil of other creatures, it would not be metame like the flesh itself. The flesh of an avela is metame b'kezayis, but the blood would only be metame if it is a revius. Avodomo metame kibisaro. However, with regard to the dam of nevela, it will transmit tuma like its basar. And when the Mishnah says that the dam of nevela is tar, it just means that the dam does not render food susceptible to tumah. It's not a machshir of tumah. Amar Rabbi Yossi, pligi b'trei trei namuroim. What's the status of the dam of nevela? It's machlokas tanoim. V'chad omer tamei, v'chad omer tar. Mandi omer tamei ke Rabbi Yehuda. He agrees with the opinion of the Tana Rabbi Yehuda. And this was Rabbi Yehuda that was quoted in Edios, that Beis Hillel hold that the dam of an avela is metame. And the Brisa explains this to mean that according to Beis Hillel, the blood is tame when it is a revius of dam. Umadi Yom Tar ki Rabbi Yeshua ben Pesora. We had quoted Rabbi Yeshua ben Pesora earlier, and this Rabbi Yasa disagrees with our original interpretation of Rabbi Yeshua ben Pesora, and according to him, this means literally that the blood of nevela does not transmit tumas nevela at all. Period. Amalei Rav Avduma to Nechuta came from a place called Nechuta. The Yoz, is this really correct that Rabbi Yehuda considers dam of an avail to be metame if there's a revius of dam? To Rabbi Yehuda mor yona to Beinasi Ahavi. Rabbi Yehuda was the final posek for the base Hanasi, meaning for Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And we learned that in the case of the mule of Rabbi Yehuda ben Nasi, who died, they declared, and apparently Rabbi Yehuda was the one who advocated this ruling, that the dam is tar. It's not mitami at all. And now you're telling me that, according to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi at least, Rabbi Yehuda would hold that the dam is mitame. So the Gemara doesn't seem to come to any conclusion here. But Rabbi Yehuda ben Levi is explaining that when we're specifically talking about a revius of dam, Rabbi Yehuda ruled that it is mitame kinavela. In the case of the mule of Rebbe, they would mitire the dam. That was because it had less than a revius. The Mishnah says, Kol harokim in Yerushalayim is tar, except for the Shukah Elyon. The Gemara asks, Lokein Omer Rabbi Abba b'shem Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. Didn't Rabbi Avo say in the name of Rabbi Yossi, Lo Gozru al Roksha b'Yerushalayim, period, implying that even in the Shuk, the upper Shuk, Elyon, it would also not be Tomei. So Gemara answers, with regard to that Mishnah, we have the statement of Rabbi Ovin b'shem Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, that Katzron shel Nachrim Hayasham, that in the upper marketplace of Yerushalayim, there the Gentiles were doing their laundry, and there was a massive amount of Gentiles there who are Matami Mirabanan to Mazava, and that's why the roke that we find in the upper marketplace is assumed to be Tomei. Now the Mishnah quotes Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yosa made a chilk between the whole year round and the regolim. B'shayimos hashana hatmei mahalchim shibolas. Shibolas means down the middle of the road. Tahorim mahalchim and atzad, they go on the side. And the Tahorim are trying to be marking themselves from the Tmeim. Hatmeim mahalchim stam, they go down the middle of the road. Hatahorim omlehem prushu. And the Tahorim say, don't come here to the sides. We don't want to be contaminated by your tumah. But b'shasa regel, hatahorim mahalchim chiboles. The only regel come to Yerushalayim, they go down the middle of the road. And therefore, hatmeim mahalchim in atzdadim. And the Tmeim go on the side, the Tahorim Alchim Stam, and the Tmeim Omrim Lem Prushu, and the Tmeim say to the Tahorim, don't go on the sides here, because we are Tmeim and you'll contaminate yourselves. V'chol HaKelim HaNitzoyim, any Keli found in Yerushalayim, we assume that it was tar, unless he finds it on the way down to the mikvah. Lokeina Omer Rabbi Abba, B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan, don't we have a statement of Rabbi Abba that Lo Gozal HaKelim B'Yerushalayim? The Gemara answers, Mikevet Shenimtu B'derech Yerid L'Beis HaTfilah Nasu Ochiach. The fact that you find it on the way down to the mikveh is Hochacha, it's proof positive that this Keli was being taken to the mikveh and he lost it before he got to the mikveh, and therefore it's B'cheskas Tomei. Abashala Yukore Osam Tziporin. This hammer that we spoke about in our Mishnah had two names to it. Abashol would call it Tziporin. Tziporin means like a fingernail comes to a point. This was a hammer that came to a point. And the Mishnah itself uses the word maritza, which is to crush something. That this hammer had a pointed head, and therefore they called it Tziporin. Man Diomer Maritza, the one who says that it was called a crusher. Shemaritza es ha'even lebeis hakvaros. They would crush the stones in order to bury the dead. And again, as I told you before, this is very strange in the Rambam, but the simple pshat is that there were stones that made it impossible to dig the grave, and they used a hammer to crush the stones. Kofitz, if he finds a kli that's not used for shechita of Korban Pesach because it's used to break bones, then whether he finds it on the 13th or the 14th of Nisan, he's chayav to be makbil, unless it was tied to a knife. And Tony, we learned in the Brisa just the opposite. Hasakin kshura law, harezukim also. That the sakin, because it's tied down to the kofitz, therefore it has the same status as the kofitz, and the sakin now is assumed to be tomei. The Mishnah tells us that parochas shenitmeis bivlada tuma. Right, this is very, very complicated because here we have to get the midos of the parochas and figure out what's the din of an avatuma, vlada tuma. I suggest that we'll pick this up in Mirza Hashem tomorrow.